Hi, this is Alyssa Getzoff from eXp Realty. I am off camera, and on camera we have Brian and Lindsay Rosegger from the Lost Coast Oyster Company here in St. Pete, and it's a beautiful day in their backyard during their lunch break from their regular jobs. So thank you so much for inviting me here to meet with you and learn about your company. So I guess, can you tell me about your company, what you're doing, what you're hoping to achieve, how people get in touch with you, all that sort of, stuff.
So we are the first full water column oyster farm in Tampa Bay. And what we do is we take oysters from a hatchery and we raise them up on our 2-acre farm area. And we grow, in about 9 months to a year's time, we can grow a 3-inch oyster that is then sold to restaurants or direct to consumer. So essentially, what we are conducting is called aquaculture. It's farming of the sea. And so the idea behind aquaculture is that if more folks get on board with aquaculture, we can reduce some of the demand and the pressure that is on our wild stocks of fishes.
So what does that single column mean?
So water column culture. So traditionally, oysters are, they grow in these kind of aggregations that are referred to as a reef, right? They grow on the bottom of the ocean. So what we do is we take those oysters off the bottom, we put them in a cage floating at the surface. So we use the entire water column of the sea there to conduct the farming. And the idea behind this off-bottom culture is that it provides us with greater control over the farming process. And we take the oysters and put them in a more productive part of the water column where they get access to greater sunlight and food availability.
Wow, I had no idea there was so much involved. I'm totally serious. I mean, I just eat them and love them.
Yeah.
But
kind of what Brian was talking about too. There are, a bunch of oyster growers around the country, many in the state of Florida. And in response to the fact that there are dwindling populations in the wild, this is kind of the new way to grow and raise an oyster for consumption. So it's really, really sustainable. We don't take anything from the wild, like Brian mentioned. And since they're grown on the top, we're kind of able to control for the shape, and we're able to get like a deeper cup in the shell, which will yield more meat. It's overall just kind of a prettier, more sustainable product. And that makes it really ideal for going into restaurants and for people to consume them.
So how did you get into this? I have to ask.
That would be you.
Yeah, so I started my career working on the BP oil spill. I finished my degree at University of South Florida in 2011. And then immediately I went up and started working on throughout the Gulf Coast region as a trustee to NOAA, doing the damage assessment on the BP oil spill. And so through that process, I kind of got a look inside of the oyster industry in the Gulf Coast, and I realized that there was a transition that was happening in that the Gulf Coast region was really transitioning from a wild harvest fishery to a farmed industry. So it presented a lot of opportunity for us in the state of Florida, particularly with the closure of Apalachicola Bay for wild harvest. The writing was on the wall for us that if we wanted oysters to continue to come out of the state of Florida, that we were going to have to be a part of that solution and farming these bivalves ourselves.
So where do I find your oysters? Because now I'm so enticed. I love oysters. So
Awesome.
how do I buy them, or what restaurants can I go to sample them?
Sure. So we are in a handful of local restaurants. We really stay, local right now since we live in St. Petersburg. We have some restaurants in Tampa. We have some, kind of all over Pinellas. But it kind of rotates each week. What we do is we harvest on Thursdays.
Okay.
And then we actually deliver to the restaurants on Thursdays or Fridays. So it's as local and as fresh as you can get. We kind of have this slogan, we say same day seafood, because it's harvested and plated often on the same day. And it's pulled out of the water and then that night it's on your plate. So in terms of what restaurants we're in, I can name a few of them. Recently, we've been in Burns Steakhouse in Haven over in South Tampa, which we're
know them well.
Really honored to be in that those fine establishments. Over in Pinellas, we're on the menu at Alto Mare, on Beach Drive. We are in Bascom's Chop House pretty regularly. Urban Still House. We try to post on our social media each week of where exactly we're going to be, just because it does rotate.
Okay.
And then occasionally, when we have leftovers from a harvest, we'll do retail sales. And those can be found on our website, which is lostcoastoysters.com. And again, we always post on our social media when those sales open on our website.
So if we go to lostcoastoysters.com, we will find the links to your social media?
Correct, yes.
Okay, perfect.
And our handle is just Lost Coast Oysters, both on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, very cool. What do you love most about the business?
So I grew up kind of like on the water, doing a lot of fishing and jumping in ponds and swimming and just being a general, Florida boy. And I like the idea of taking something from nothing, creating something from where it didn't exist, and really being a part of like the local food movement, in connecting people with the places that they get their food. I think that it's far too often that something ends up on our plate and we're 5, 10, 20 steps removed from the person that grew this food or raised this animal. And I think that's one of the things that we've enjoyed the most about our business, is connecting people with food, and also hearing from people and seeing how impassioned they are about our product.
That's awesome.
I think what I like most about the business that we've kind of created is how multifaceted it is. So, we're creating this delicious product that people like to consume. It's healthy, it's good for the environment, but the other part of that is it's taking nothing from the wild, and it's only really giving back in a positive way. So each oyster filters 50 gallons of water per day, and that's where it gets its food. So an oyster growing in the water is doing a service to the water as well. So it's not just one thing where we're making a product and then we're selling it and then that's really it. It's in having this business in general, we're making a small impact in the waterways in which we live. So that's kind of most exciting to me, and also just watching people taste our oysters and getting to tell them where the oysters were grown, which is right in our backyard, and kind of connecting with people that enjoy seafood, enjoy oysters, and letting them know a little bit about how they're grown has been a favorite part for me.
That's so cool. So how do you get a piece of water to have your farm? Like, I can understand it. I'm a realtor. I get it. Here's a piece of land. There's nothing on it. Put some, plants and grow whatever. But how does that work for water?
So here in the state of Florida, the state owns everything within a 9-mile boundary of the coastline in the Gulf of Mexico and within a 3-mile boundary on the Atlantic side. So these waters, they're ours. They're not mine, they're yours, they're hers, they're everybody's. They're for people to boat, they're for people to fish, they're for people to jet ski, to sail, and we want to try to farm. So we petitioned to the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and we applied for what's called a submerged land lease. So we leased this submerged land from the state, and after a lengthy review and public comment period, we were awarded the lease, and it's renewed on an annual basis.
Wow, that is so interesting.
Yeah.
I did not know you could get a submerged land lease. They don't really teach you that in realtor school.
No,
Honestly, it was a lot of not trial and error, but it was not the easiest process ever. We're the first off-bottom aquaculture lease in the history of Tampa Bay. There are other people farming shellfish here, but they have their clams are grown on the bottom. So we were the first to kind of try and attempt this, and it did take us a few years. So I have to give all of the props to Brian because he really didn't give up. They said no to him how many times?
4 times.
4 times of where we nominated different sites. They weren't suitable for, a variety of reasons. So it didn't seem like it was in the cards for us to be able to farm oysters in Tampa Bay. And we've had a lot of obstacles just getting that water. The 2 acres in the middle of the bay. But we finally got it, and we have some infrastructure out there now, and we're growing them. So it's been kind of a long time coming.
So how long does it take for an oyster to grow up, and how much does 2 acres yield?
So right now we're still ramping up our production, and we're not producing nearly at even close to our full capacity of the 2 acres that we have there. But now we've planted somewhere around 100,000 oysters at our farm, maybe a little bit more.
Holy smokes!
And it sounds like a lot. It really
It
does.
does.
But when you get, when we buy them from a hatchery, they're about the size of your pinky nail. And so 100,000 oysters just, it looks like
Yeah, when you first get them that
like
size,
a
it's
couple
like a few bags.
a couple backpacks.
Really?
But in about 9 to 12 months, those oysters will grow up to be about 3 inches in size. 3 inches is pretty much where we try to harvest them for the restaurants. And throughout that process, they're handled several times through the grow out. We're grading them constantly for size. We're drying them out to remove biofouling, the accumulation of other organisms that grow on the oyster's shell, whether it be algae or barnacles or tunicates or sea squirts or all these other little creepy crawlers that we find living in our oyster bags. So it's really a labor of love, and it's not like something where you just like, what is it, you plant it and you forget about it,
We say that there are definitely easier ways to make money, and we often call it our sharp, heavy rock farm.
Yeah, it's an expensive, heavy, sharp rock farm.
But it is a labor of love.
It is a labor of love.
I like to say that they're like our babies, because when we're out on the farm, we are hand picking through these oysters. So if there's one, like maybe there's a sea squirt and it's attached to like 2 of them, I'll pick them apart and I'll just be like, I just saved your life, and then I'll like throw it into the ready to go pile. And so we really do kind of coddle some of the oysters, and then we hand pick them out when they're market ready. So I mean, just even being that connected to our product, you really take pride in it when you're that hands-on.
So how do you, if it's a submerged farm, how are you in the water, or do you bring them up? Like can you tell I have no experience
Well, we like to show
with this.
pictures when people ask questions like that, because it is a little hard to picture. And before we got into this, I mean, if you asked me how an oyster was grown, I would not be able to tell you myself, but they're essentially grown in these floating bags on the top of the water columns. So we do it from our boat. Our lease is about 5 to 7 feet deep, just depending on the tide. So we're not really in the water handling these bags. We're essentially pulling them up onto our boat from the side of the boat. So
Okay.
it's a little backbreaking at times.
So
I
what
can
we have is
imagine.
we have a series of lines at the farm, and each line on the terminal end, there's a buoy that runs down with a chain to an anchor that anchors them to the seafloor. Now, on that line that runs horizontal to the bottom, we have bags that have floats on them that are connected to the line. So these bags have differing mesh sizes of the holes that allow the water to flow through where the oysters get their food. So they start out in a 4 millimeter bag, And as the oysters grow, we move them into a 9 and then a 14 and then ultimately an 18 millimeter bag for the final grow out.
So is there anything else that I forgot to ask that you would like to bring up?
Yeah, we just really want to highlight kind of the sustainable components of aquaculture. When you hear about things like farmed salmon or farmed tuna or farmed anything from the sea, there tends to be somewhat of a negative connotation that is associated with that. And, you know, not to throw shade at those other practices, but shellfish aquaculture is recognized worldwide as being one of the most sustainable forms of protein production on the planet. And it is for a multitude of reasons, mainly being that our main inputs to our farm are sweat, blood, tears. We don't feed our animals, the oysters. They are performing a service out in the environment. They're passively eating algae and phytoplankton that is available in the bay. And also, oysters are a keystone species. So we've noticed that, you know, at our farm, we now see all types of fishes and crabs and worms and shrimps and birds and
manatees.
Oysters being a keystone species, something that other species rely upon for their health. It really sheds light on the value of shellfish aquaculture, because you're creating something that was not there originally. You're providing a habitat for these other organisms, and then you're growing protein, growing food in one of the most sustainable ways known on the planet. So it really highlights the importance of responsible, purpose-driven, sustainable aquaculture.
I love that. I love that.
And I think something else we really want people to know is since we're kind of the first to grow off-bottom oysters in the Tampa Bay area, there's been a little bit of a misconception about whether it's safe or not to eat shellfish out of the Tampa Bay, just because, you know, it hasn't really been done in recent years, other than the clams, which are doing great and they're delicious as well. But we do want people to know that, you know, we grow our oysters in Lower Tampa Bay in the Terracea Aquatic Preserve. The water is excellent quality. It's routinely tested by the state of Florida. So there is, you know, that misconception that it might not be, you know, a body of water that you would want to eat shellfish from, but we're here to tell you that that's not the case, and our oysters are delicious and safe and healthy to eat.
I can't wait to have some. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you have full-time jobs to get back to,
Yes.
and you were, you know, I've taken you from your lunch. So thank you.
Yeah,